Hello, welcome to Maltbox, the non-chill filtered whisky blog. I'm Andy and this is Whisky Review number 77. What I have for you today is a limited edition bottling from one of White & Mackay's portfolio from the island of Jura. And it's this, Jura 212. So every year Jura release some special edition, limited edition bottlings, and this is the inaugural bottling of that this year. So named 212 because there are 212 because there are 212 inhabitants of the island of Jura. It's not a small island. I mean, it is, but it's not like, they're going to be quite spread out. There's a lot of space. There's a lot of space going on Jura. So this is bottled at 47.5%. This retails at £88.95, generally speaking, so it's up there. It is a 13-year-old single malt, quite expensive for a single malt of that age. It's also quite expensive for Jura in general, if I'm being honest with you. I'm not normally the biggest fan, because I'll be honest, I don't particularly like what their owners do with their spirit, similar to Dalmore and Fettercairn and other little delights that they keep to one side and then fill with caramel colouring and chill filter it within an inch of its life. So, Jura 212, as far as I'm aware, there's E150 in there because there's nothing to say otherwise. So, there you go. So what can we call that today? Richard Patterson's Tan. There we are. Lovely stuff. Lovely stuff. So this is quite a recent bottling. There's a few still knocking about online. You can still buy it from people like the Whisky Exchange and Master of Malt. This is one, well, it's not even one, it's not a full bottle. There are 6,000 bottles released in this release. As I say, 47.5%. Should we see what it's like on the nose? Fruity, lemon drizzle cake, caramel shortbread, weirdly, cranberry juice. Very specific, but that's what I'm getting. Star anise, candied ginger, so little ginger cubes. That's something like very, very intense, very sugary, but still very gingery and hot. And it's also quite musty towards the end of that nose there. Now, this is being matured in ex-bourbon casks. It is then spent a finishing period in, let me get the name of this right, chinkapin oak. So, transferred into casks made of chinkapin oak, and that is a species of oak that is native to certain areas of North America. I'll be honest, it's not something I've personally come across before, at least not intentionally anyway. I might have drunk something that's been finished in that before and not even realised, but they are specifying that this is spent a finishing period in chinkapin oak. Shall we see what's got on the nose? Now, I'll be honest, that's got a quite good mouthfeel. That's much better mouthfeel than I've experienced from the majority, if not all, of previous own bottling Juras. Distillery bottlings, generally speaking, from Jura, I find are quite thin on the texture front. It's nutty, and when I say nutty, I'm talking something slightly salty as well. Think pistachios. It's also quite oily and nutty. Think walnuts or Brazil nuts. It's got a saltiness just kind of going through it. caramel, salted toffee. I'm thinking solid toffee with sea salt flakes. It's not overpowering. It's just adding to the overall experience. It's quite umami in a way. It's at the side of my mouth there, which I think is where you get your bitterness levels from. I mean, I'm not a tongue doctor. What do I know? Again, a little bit of ginger in there. It's actually quite warming as well. Quite warming on the finish in particular. It's giving me a nice bit of heat there. Now, usually for higher strength whiskies, I would add water. I had, however, experimented. I mean, I suppose I was experienced with this at some point. It's not the first time I've drank it, but I did experiment with adding some water to this when we did the tweet tasting last week, and I found that it wasn't as good with water, basically. It lost a lot of texture, mouthfeel, that went by the board. The nose closed in on itself, and at the same time it was a little bit spiky. I felt it kind of lost its way a little bit, so I'm not going to do that today, if I'm being honest with you. So do bear in mind, whiskies of this strength are normally a game of two halves. This is going to be very much a one-half display. I'm just going back to that nose there. It is still a little bit musty. You've still got that citrus in there as well. The way I describe it, it's quite clunky. It's quite clunky, which I think is similar to what I said about the Jura 10 actually. And I think that's kind of a distillery trait that I find quite often with Jura. I find that independent bottlings of Jura are a little bit more fruit forward, a little bit more delicate, I guess you could say. But for me, their own distillery bottlings tend to be quite clunky, quite musty, quite tight. They do release flavour, don't get me wrong, there's some very nice flavours in there. But I just find that's what they do. I don't know what it is they do in the official bottlings, but that's just my experience with them. Again, on the finish, slightly nutty, a little bit of honey, and it's again getting a little bit dusty, a little bit musty, cardboardy into the finish. So do you know what, overall, as Juras go, for my opinion, again, not the biggest fan of Jura, and that hasn't affected my scoring by the way, decent dram. Would I pay 89 quid for it? No. No, I wouldn't pay 89 quid for this, if I'm being honest with you. The 13-year-old, I get it's limited to 6,000 bottles, but it's not a 90 quid whiskey in my opinion. In terms of score, I'm going to give this 5 out of 10. I think it's got a lot of good qualities to it. I like the texture. I like the initial pops of flavour, a little bit of fruit, salt in there as well. It's quite a nice combination. But for me, it just doesn't quite stack up to the price range and the potential presentation, because again, I suspect it's got colour added to it as well. Yeah, thank you very much for watching. See you soon.